of the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We have 25 member programs across the state of Iowa that provide direct services to survivors of sexual assault. At our office here in Des Moines, we provide training and advocacy, things like coming here and also working with all of those programs so that they can do a good job of responding to survivors. When I thought about coming here, the first thing I thought about was Minette Doderer. And I have a little note here in case somebody might be too young to remember her, but that might not be true. Anyway, so Minette was first elected in '64, and she had a 36-year political career here. And some of you may know this story too, but one of the things that Minette did at the start of the session was she gathered all the pages together, and she said, there are things that happen here that young women should not experience, and there's sexual harassment that goes on. And she wanted them to know, no, this is not okay, and if you have any problems, you come to me, and I will address it. And I'm sure she couldn't. I think probably at that time they were mostly the women pages. I think if someone were doing that today, it would also be the young men, because we know a whole lot more about that. But, so that's what I thought of, back. So she retired in 2000 and did that lecture all the way through. We had a poll recently, 2017 poll by the Register, that showed 41% of men and 9% of men reported experience of workplace sexual harassment. And those are numbers, and we know that it's really underreported like every other kind of sexual crime. Many survivors don't feel comfortable coming forward. They're afraid they'll lose their job. I think particularly when we hear from people in the lower wage jobs, I mean, the job that we heard about here was a more high profile job, but we hear from farm workers and people working in fast food and retail, and they can't afford to lose those jobs, so they're afraid to come forward. So I think realistically that number is a whole lot higher. When I think about sexual harassment in general, somebody feel free to correct me, but I think the number of women who've been sexually harassed is 100%. When we're talking about school, street, workplace, family, everywhere, I don't know of anyone to whom that has not happened. So it says something about our culture, right? I'm going through that. I want to talk about a couple things that are happening legislatively elsewhere. So there was a sweeping bipartisan bill introduced in the Congress. It amends the Victims of Crime Act and the Congressional Accountability Act, and it would make reporting, resolution, and settlement process more transparent. It also aims to protect victims' identity coming forward, which is very important to some survivors. And it would mandate law breakers to reimburse the Treasury, which is something Senator Peterson's going to talk about, for settlements of harassment claims rather than that being the taxpayers. In Florida, there was a bill created that is creating a task force on prevention of sexual harassment and misconduct, and it's going to have members of the legislature and representatives from the Florida Coalition Against Sexual Violence. So those are my counterparts in Florida. They would create new penalties for sexual misconduct. It would study the problem and recommend best practices in public office. It also gives some additional authority to the Florida Commission on Ethics to investigate harassment complaints. So that includes attempts at retaliation against victims who come forward, and also protects victims' identifying information when they make a complaint. We have some bills floating around right now that also address the prevention of sexual violence, which is where we ultimately want to go. We don't need to be doing this for years and years and years responding. We need to be preventing. So there's Senate File 2029, which Senator Yoakum introduced, and it would include age-appropriate and valuable information about sexual abuse and sexual assault awareness and sexual education courses for K-12. Senator Peterson, and I'll let you talk more about that, her bill that seeks restitution from someone who's committed sexual harassment, and there is a settlement. And very interestingly, I was at a meeting with my counterpart from Colorado about a month ago, and she said, "Why do you all do that?" So it's kind of fun to call her up and say, yeah, we are. So that would allow the Attorney General to get person or people who've caused harm to pay back the taxpayers. And of course, there's many more things that can be done, and I really think we should come together and address this. We also need funding to provide survivors with comprehensive victim services. It's very, very hard to do this on your own, very hard to do this without somebody by your side, explaining the ropes, telling you what can happen, allowing you to step back if you want, and really giving that back to the person who wants to make a complaint. So the current budget proposals from Governor Kim Reynolds and the legislature actually paint a pretty grim picture for our crisis centers throughout the state. Since this national reckoning has started to occur, our crisis centers have received an influx of calls and people coming in. This always happens anytime there's a big public event. But what happens when we have to start closing those centers? And because there's not enough money to fund them, who are they going to reach out to? We also really cannot ignore funding and support for prevention. The amount of money out of the total money that goes to address sexual assault in the state for prevention is 1%. So that doesn't go very far. We do what we can. We are working at what we call primary prevention, so we're really trying to look at the root causes of sexual violence, starting with little kids, starting with people in communities who can influence little kids, parents, coaches, faith-based leaders, but we've got 1% of our state money to fund that. We've got to do better than that. It's time to invest in that. So we want people to step up to the plate. Actions speak a lot louder than words, of course. And we've got to address sexual violence in all of the arenas that it happens, which we're hearing all over the place lately, government, businesses, schools, more. We need training, we need policies, we need laws to empower survivors and hold those who cause harm accountable for their actions. And I want to end what I'm saying with a couple of brief stories. I have two daughters who are 19 and 20 now. When my older daughter was 7, I was watching her and a friend at a playground. Marty's shaking her head. She can't believe they're that old. So she and her friend were playing at a playground. They're 7. My daughter doesn't look like me. She's African American. Her little friend was African American. So I think it looked, to anybody who might be looking in, that there's no protective adult here. So several adolescent boys came up and started making remarks about their bodies and what they'd like to do to their bodies, to 7-year-olds. I quickly and angrily intervened, and it broke my heart. It just broke my heart that second graders were already dealing with harassment on a playground. Second story. My mother passed away a couple of years ago. She had dementia, and she was in a care facility for a while. She was talking with me one day, and she said, I want to tell you something I've never told anyone. She went to college when she was 17. She was really poor, put herself through school, didn't have money for a car, didn't have money for a bus fare, walked a very long way back and forth to school. And one day, a professor of hers saw her walking and pulled her over and offered her a ride to school. She thought that was very nice of him. She got in the car, and after they'd gone a couple blocks, he pulled over and said, I want to show you something. And he pulled out this book, you know, those little cartoon flip books where you flip pages and it looks like an animated cartoon. So he showed her one of those books, and it was pornography. Oh. So my very sheltered 17-year-old mom just got out of the car and fled. She hadn't seen that. So there are 59 years between those incidents. What happened to my mom and what happened to my daughters. Little girl isn't safe on a playground, and an old woman with dementia, and she related this in great detail, is still haunted by something that happened to her 70 years prior. Adolescent boys, tenured college professor, and now, of course, we've got doctors, coaches, filmmakers, employers, legislative staffers, representatives, senators, and, of course, our president. Yeah. So survivors have carried this burden by themselves for too long. It's not their burden to carry alone. And so I think for all of us to speak out in the way Senator Doder did and the way Senator Peterson is going to, we have to send a message that this won't be tolerated, and we're going to work collectively to prevent it and stop it. Thank you.
should be giving Beth a standing ovation because I know we hear a lot of bad things in the news, but there are a lot of really good Iowans doing good things across our state. And Beth, we love having you here. Thank you for all you do to support people. Amazing work. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come to talk to you. I wish the subject was a little bit nicer subject for the Iowa Senate because, as all of you know, the Iowa Senate received a black eye in the Kirsten Anderson lawsuit, and I cannot commend her enough for having the courage and being brave enough to step forward and take Senate Republicans to court after being fired hours after she gave a written complaint about sexual harassment in the Iowa Senate. As you know, if we could go back through this, that happened in about 4 years later. The verdict came down. Kirsten had requested $1.1 million, and an Iowa jury awarded her $2.2 million, which, if you know anything about Iowans, you know something like that is simply unheard of. If you read the testimony, you can see why the jury gave her the award that they did. Eventually, she and her attorneys reached a settlement with Republican leaders for $1.75 million. And who's paying that bill? We are, Iowa taxpayers. And you know, the only person who lost a job over this entire scandal was the victim. It goes completely against what is written in the Iowa Senate handbook. Retaliation against a whistleblower is grounds for termination, and that has not been investigated in the Iowa Senate. Senate leadership brought forth Ambassador Kramer to come and do a review. She was supposed to look forward, not backward. Retaliation was never addressed in her work with the Iowa Senate. But the one thing I will say about Ambassador Kramer's report is that it said nothing has changed. People are still scared to come forward. And it's clear to me, why would anyone be willing to come forward when they saw the only person harmed in this is the victim? So last week, 20 Senate Democrats, there's 20 Democrats in the Senate, so every Senate Democrat, and one independent senator, the only independent senator, Senator Johnson back there. Last week, we sent a message to employees who harass their coworkers or subordinates that their conduct will no longer be tolerated and that they'll be held responsible for their illegal behavior. We filed this legislation, 21 sponsors, that would change the rules of the game of such verdicts and respond to Iowa taxpayers who are not happy about having to foot the $1.75 million bill for the bad behavior of Senate Republican caucus. Under our proposal, a law would allow that the plaintiff to receive an award from the state, so the victim would still receive the award, but it would require the Attorney General to recover the amount of the award from the offending legislators or state employees. We believe that there should be consequences for bad behavior, and we don't believe that the only person that should be harmed is the victim. Second, we've made recommendation to Senate Republican leaders and their outside consultant, Ambassador Kramer, to update and strengthen our Senate policies and procedures. We believe that changes have not been made and that the state could, in fact, taxpayers could potentially have other lawsuits based on policies that are inadequate. Some of our recommendations, including victims of harassment, should have a clear path to file complaints and have them investigated in a fair, impartial, and confidential manner. Under our current Senate policies, they're inadequate, unclear, and need to be improved. And you may know Kirsten Anderson's case was not investigated until after the verdict came down, and the person who requested the investigation was also the person that was responsible for her losing her position. Victims who step forward to file a complaint about harassment should be protected from retaliation or discrimination by anyone. And the same protections must also be available for the witnesses and others involved in any investigation. Our current Senate policies are inadequate and also non-existent in this area. You know, we have small staffs in the Iowa Senate and House, and so we have concerns about those who come forward and tell the truth, that we want to make sure that they don't lose their job by standing up for someone who's been a victim. Also, there should be a clear process for punishing senators, employees, or anyone else who takes retaliatory action against someone who's filed a complaint. And we also need to do the same to protect our witnesses. The Senate has an ethics committee comprised of 5 men and 1 woman. It's equal representation from both parties, but the Senate Ethics Committee does not have policies in place on how to handle situations like what we faced in the Kirsten Anderson case. We also work in a very unique place here at the State House because senators are elected. You know, a leader can't fire a senator. We have lobbyists who work here that aren't employed by the state capitol. They have employers that they report to. And we have the media here as well who have their own employers. And how do we address those groups on anti-harassment policies? Should they be forced to take harassment prevention training classes? All of the senators last week went through workplace harassment training. Last week, we all signed that we had gone through the course, but we were trained on our existing policies because none of the policies have been changed yet. Lastly, I believe that leadership, both minority party and majority party, need to be trained on what to do when someone comes forward. There's currently no training in place on how to receive a complaint, how to investigate it, and how to take corrective action. And should we be allowed to seek an outside independent group to help conduct the investigation? As you know, the House and Senate Republicans decided recently to hire an HR person. Senate Democrats were not part of that process. We weren't asked to look at the job description. We weren't asked to make any recommendations on who this person should or should not be reporting to. Would this person have enough teeth in their ability to take action if a complaint came to that office and that person was hired? That person reports to the 2 Republican appointees, the Secretary of the Senate and the Chief Clerk of the House. Do we believe that that person would have the capability to handle a harassment complaint that comes to them? You know, that's yet to be determined. I guess lastly, what I would say is I do believe there is a reckoning in our country, and it's time for us to make some pretty significant policy changes on how we're going to handle this. I do believe taxpayers are furious all across the state. It doesn't matter what party they're in. The fact that a victim was fired for coming forward and nothing has been done to those that allowed that to happen, and taxpayers are having to foot the bill, I think Iowans have every right to be upset, and I'm hopeful that our legislation will be approved this year, and I'm also hopeful that Republican leaders in the Senate will realize that this is serious and that we have to enact policy changes that will make our Senate and hopefully the House of Representatives a more welcoming and safe environment for people to work in. And I would be happy to take questions.
So if you'll just raise your hand and we'll take questions. If you'll be brief in your questions, we can get some more of them. We have about 10, 15 minutes or so. Yes, back in the corner.
I think I didn't hear you, but if sexual harassment was to occur today, what's the name of the person or the department a person will go to? If it happened today?
If it happened today, our Senate handbook says that they could come to their supervisor, or if that was, maybe say that person was someone they weren't comfortable with, they could go to their leader, or they could go to the Secretary of the Senate. So there, and I will say, under the Kirsten Anderson case, had they followed our handbook, which outlines, you can't take you can't retaliate against a victim, we would not be, I don't believe we'd be in this situation because her case was never investigated. She was just fired.
So do all the employees here know this, what you're telling me? They all have handbooks? and
They all have handbooks.
They know where to go.
And
But they don't feel comfortable?
well, I think,
Is there an alternative for them?
what the, if you read what Ambassador Kramer wrote in her report, she wrote in her report, as of now, there is nothing that has changed to prevent additional inappropriate behavior and ensuing problems, and that people still felt scared to come forward. They don't understand what zero tolerance means, partially because they've gotten mixed messages.
There's a question over here by the door.
How would it work if the people involved were actually, had actually paid the reparations? Would it be taken out? I mean, okay, so someone could say, they're money somewhere else, I don't have any money, I can't do anything. I've seen that happen before, so what is the
Well, that's,
mechanism?
our legislation makes sure the victim still would be paid by the state. So the victim wouldn't lose out through our legislation, but it would require the AG to go after the perpetrators.
Okay, so would it be that they would go after their requirement or something along that line and they couldn't get it any other way? Could be. I would hope so, but I really, that's the question I've got. How would they get, because I mean, there are lots of ways people I've seen hidden money and done all that kind of things in order not to pay off.
We don't have that outlined per se in the bill. We've got to the AG to establish the kind of the procedures. I assume maybe it's similar to how we go after collection of child support payments or things like that, so.
Does the state have an ethics committee, and if so, is it a strong one? Would something like this follow up to that?
We do have a Senate Ethics Committee, and that was one of the concerns I have, is that how they receive complaints and how they are able to address that. Those complaints is not, there aren't procedures in place right now for how would they receive those complaints and how would they act upon them. I think the last time the Senate Ethics Committee had a complaint, Senator Johnson, you may have to correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was the Kent Sorensen case over the money laundering in the Iowa caucuses, and they hired an outside investigator. Am I correct?
Does your bill have a number?
It does, and I don't have my number with me. Maybe
Okay.
somebody can.
It's in file 29, is that?
Is it
2029,
2029?
2021, okay.
is that right? We'll look, and we'll check and make sure. Other questions?
I have 21.
Yes, back in the corner.
Explain to me why the abuser is still working here?
The question is, explain why the abuser is still working.
I can't explain.
There's no explanation.
That would seem like, from a taxpayer's perspective, basically a 101, that the first thing you do is when you got lost, was convicted in the case, that he would be on. So I do not understand why he still has a job here.
It wasn't a criminal case,
Okay.
so there's no conviction of somebody. And he did leave last summer, I
Suggest he
think.
don't strongly?
I don't know, I assume they did, or like whatever happened, he left last summer.
Oh, he did quit, okay.
Yeah.
My understanding is because he was able to resign, he was able to keep like his state benefits and
Probably.
pension and retirement, all that kind of stuff.
He would have kept that anyway. Other questions?
What can a citizen do who's concerned about changing the culture here? Can we propose a pledge that each of the legislators, and this is just, we're talking about the Senate side, we also have that outside as well, that could also propose something jointly?
We all signed kind of a document, we went through training of kind of a pledge of kind of, I'm not exactly sure what it was called, but expectation. I do think people should be held accountable, and I think that there are a lot of ways that you can hold people accountable, you know, for their behavior, and if they believe that's the type of leadership that they want representing them, then I think there are a lot of ways citizens can engage on the issue.
Voting.
One of my colleagues in New Mexico, it's still not as broad as they would like it to be, but they're planning to have training for all of the Democrats in the legislature, as well as all of the candidates and all of their staff and all of the lobbyists. So I'm not sure what they're doing about the Republican part of that, but they
The
have
House
their.
did that for all of our legislators and all of our staff, our pages. But I don't think we've done it for our candidates.
Ours was all of our senators, Senate staff, and pages.
Yes, go ahead.
I had heard that Kristen Anderson experienced sexual harassment over a period of 5 years before she filed a complaint. Is that true? Anyone?
I think that's true. I think that's true, yeah. I think that was in the trial.
That it went on that long.
Somebody did such a job.
I'm sure it's in the court record, if you want to.
You know, sexual harassment is oftentimes a private act. And if the victim doesn't want to or doesn't know how to report it, it can go on for a long time.
Other questions?
I just have a quick comment. So, my name is Maddie Smith. I work with Beth at the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Real briefly here, I see a lot of men in the room, which is awesome. And I think that we really have to, as men, understand that we need to join the conversation. It's not up to women to be having this conversation. We need to stand up and also say enough is enough. And really, I mean, just think if someone had gone to those who were causing harm in the legislature, who were men, who had said something and really held those accountable. I just think that can't be discounted. The more that men can stand up and speak out, and just not have women hold this burden alone, I think it's really important. And we do a lot of conversations at the coalition level, talking about how men can get involved, how men can start getting involved to change and shift the culture. So I think we should really join this conversation as well.
I would say that also includes talking with your children and grandchildren as
Yes.
well. So, yes, ma'am.
Just quickly, where could I find a list of the attendees, the names of the people who
In the Senate?
Yes.
What's the question?
The names of the people who would be financially responsible for the lawsuit to the state?
Due to the court document, you could take a look at the original court documents, because it eventually got transitioned to not officially name names, but to, I think it may have started out with people's names.
So a little research.
A little bit of research.
So the names are not publicly known?
I believe the way that I believe the way that it was originally filed versus how it proceeded, it was changed from people's individually named to not be individually named. Does that make sense? You'd have to trace back through the court.
It may have been because it became an action against
The state.
And that's,
You'd have to trace back a little further.
other questions? Yes.
You know, whether we know the names or not, we do know that the Senate leadership behaved poorly on one occasion after another, after another, after another. It was like a series of poor judgment. And the excuse, well, I'm just a farmer, I'm not an HR person, really, teed me off. I don't know about others. So what's happened at the top level? Any thoughts?
Well, I can tell you how the legislature works and how we elect our leaders is a decision of each party. Democrats don't get to select who the Republican leader is. That would be up to every Republican senator to determine if that is a person that they want leading their party. And at any time during any General Assembly, senators can choose to make a change in leadership. It is the responsibility of each individual party on who they want leading their party. So,
Any other questions?
Well, I'd like to make just a comment
Sure.
following up on your remarks, but it's also been talking with Matt. There's a serious agenda for structure down within the Senate Republican caucus. There's out of 29 Republicans and 1 female. To me, that's a real problem.
If you don't know, this is Senator Johnson, who is an independent, formerly known as a Republican.
And there's a new book out that we all should look at too, tomorrow. It's by the former editor-in-chief of USA Today, I can't remember her name, but it's out tomorrow.
And what's it about?
Well, it's basically eventually, let's never interrupt a woman. I put on morning joke today, so Mika's already got her copy, I don't have one, but I'm gonna read it, I'm gonna
Yeah.
read that book. It's something like something she said, how bad and should, and, there's some other stuff on it. But it's out, I can't remember her name, but she's former editor-in-chief, she was on morning joke today.
I'm sure we can Google it.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Other questions or comments? Yes.
I keep going back to this, it's a lifelong thing, most of us have run into it someplace or another. But the most astute observation, and it's not because he was a Democrat, it's not because I like him, was Alf Reagan saying, it doesn't matter how you intended it, it's how it was taken. And so you may have said something in jest that just sent shivers down someone's spine.
Anyone else? Yes.
I just have a quick question. So the person that was hired for the HR, how does that work if this person reports to two, shouldn't it be like bipartisan? Is that what it says? This is that I'm hearing.
I have concerns about how the human resources person who they report to and what their level of authority is to address situations like this. And I have concerns about it all through state government. When you look at what Governor Reynolds has done and what Governor Branstad has done over the course of their tenure, if you look at the number of state employees who've lost their merit status as employees and have become at-will employees, for them to be able to speak up and fear that they might lose their job is a problem well beyond sexual harassment. I mean, even if you look at what just happened with the ICN scandal, we have people in state government writing large checks and signing their name without another person signing off on it. I took my son to the movies at the Winsong movie theater in Johnston. They have better checks and balance with high schoolers at a movie theater on buying a ticket and having another person rip the ticket than we have in state government under the Reynolds administration. And then we have state employees beyond the merit and at will that now have no ability under the collective bargaining law to step forward and say, I can't handle a caseload this big. It is too big to protect our children without the fear of being fired. So it's well beyond sexual harassment, how they have set up a dangerous structure of state government that does not give people the ability to let taxpayers know when things are going wrong without the fear of being fired.
So there's no way to find out like what that person's job description is?
They have a job description now.
I just want to piggyback on what you said also, in that next week is budget. Our senator in our district was quoted in the Des Moines Register, Julia Garrett, and he said that the 1.75 million wasn't really all that much considering the bigger problems we have with our budget. That to me sends a very clear message. We need to talk with our voters about that.
So help me to thank Senator Peterson and the If you have not signed in, please do. We love to keep track of your attendance and especially give us your email. That's how we communicate. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, of course, More Mondays Iowa. And so Matt Sinovic over here from Progress Iowa is doing the Facebook Live feed for us. So you can tell folks and you can share that with your other friends who were not able to be here. We love to promote all of the issues. Next week, as I said, we're doing the budget with Senator Joe Bolcom, who is just around the corner, hovering. And I will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.